Good morning, friends and followers. This is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami coming to you from my basement as I'm in my jammies. My family and I are actually going on a trip today, so I have just kind of woken up and taken care of some business items before joining you live today. So I apologize for my informal attire today. However, this will be a fabulous video regardless of what I look like, because you're not showing up for what I look like, you're showing up for the content. So thank you so much for showing up. So initially in my comments, I put that we're going to be talking about portion control today. And as I was thinking through that, I'm like, no, I think it's more important to address the other elephant in the room, which is not about portion control, because we know that our portions are completely out of control. Whether we're going out to eat, whether we're putting things on a plate, we understand that we're probably serving ourselves larger portions than we need to. So I thought it was more important to talk about meals in terms of meal frequency and to a little extent, a smaller extent, meal timing, because this is something that comes up a lot. And I want to share not just my personal observations and reflections, but also logistically how to make meal frequency of meals work for you and your specific goals. So that's what we're going to be talking all about this morning. I'm probably going to go live for the next 20 minutes. So if you're catching me today, please make sure to say hi so I can say hi back. And happy Friday. If you're in the Midwest region like I am, the sun is actually shining and it looks almost beautiful outside. You can see the sunlight behind me. So beautiful today. So looking forward to taking a small little trip for spring break. My kids are on spring break right now. Before I launch into meal frequency and meal timing and all that goodness, I'd like to share a couple of announcements with you, things that I'm very excited about that are wrapping up for the rest of March. I have a workshop coming up. If you live in Minneapolis or within the greater Twin Cities area, I am personally inviting you to join me for my Super Snacks for Women workshop. Now, this workshop is at my house in Richfield. I give you the address, the exact address, when you register for the workshop. But basically, we're going to get together. We're going to make a variety of snacks, everything from energy balls to protein portables to some other things that are cost-effective, tasty, and portable for most parts. It's not anything that's going to need to be refrigerated in most cases. So we're going to be focusing on that on Thursday, March 28th, which is at 10 a.m. And your ticket price includes all the snacks we're going to be making. So not only do you get a chance to make the snacks and taste them to see if you actually like them, but you get to take as many of them as you need to, because we're going to kind of get together and make them together. And I'm giving you printed recipes. It'll be a lot of fun. You'll have the containers. You don't need to bring anything except your smiling faces. It's a super fun thing that I do usually twice a year. I might be doing more of these coming up in the next few months, but this is something that I love to do. I love to invite people to my house. I love to make food together. I love to demystify all the things that you think you know about food, like superfoods. What about that? The ingredients we're going to be using are specific to you. So I just sent out a message to my attendees so far. I have 7 out of 8, so I do have space for 1 or 2 more. I just sent a message to them asking them what they like to eat, because I am actually customizing these recipes to what people enjoy eating. So not just the things that you avoid because you have to, because you're, have an allergy or whatever, but even foods that you don't care to eat. So for example, I don't care to eat avocado. So I'm probably not going to be including snacks that include avocado. That doesn't mean that you can't do that on your own time, but I'm not going to encourage people to create snacks with foods that they don't typically eat. So that's why I like to customize these workshops. That's coming up on Thursday. I will pop the link below this video if you have time and are available to come join me. If your kids are spring breaking, this might be the perfect opportunity to take an hour or 2 away from your house, make some snacks, bring them home, have something for the kids to eat, that sort of thing. I'm really looking forward to it. The other announcement I have for you is it is still National Nutrition Month. March is National Nutrition Month. And I have been offering a 50% off all weekly meal plans on my website. So these weekly meal plans are informed by my own personal experiences. These recipes have been tested in my kitchen. In many cases, when I take a recipe, I kind of alter it a little bit to fit my specific needs or my family's needs. But I know that these are good recipes. I have shared these with many other people. They love them. I've gotten rave reviews on these recipes. In fact, some of them said that they prefer to eat some of the recipes on these meal plans as opposed to ordering out for pizza or something like that. So that's when you know they're good recipes. I have everything from gluten-free, dairy-free, gluten and dairy-free, vegetarian, dairy-free, vegetarian, and a standard one that has no dietary restrictions. So go check it out. It's worth looking into. It's less than $1 a day, but it's only on through the rest of this month, which is Sunday, March 31st. That's the 50% off. You need to use the code HALF off in order to get this deal, but it's a downloadable, so you can get it right now. You can go to the website right now, download that meal plan, and have things to cook all week long. So take the effort out of it, especially if you're spring breaking with your kids. Stop thinking about what you're cooking and instead focus on having fun with your family. These meal plans will help you do that at just $1 a day. So those are the announcements I have for you today. And now let's launch into meal frequency. Now this comes up a lot because a lot of people, they say, well, I've heard that I need to eat every 3 hours. I heard that I need to eat once a day if you're doing intermittent fasting. How many times a day do I need to eat in order to reach my goals for health? I'm not going to go into intermittent fasting too much. However, I acknowledge that it's a very common thing. A lot of people are saying, you know, don't eat for 8 hours, don't eat right when you wake up in the morning, that sort of thing. And I am not a fan of that. So just throwing it out there because I'm a big believer in the power of breakfast. That's why I created the breakfast blueprint. I'm happy to pop that link down below this video. If you've never heard of the breakfast blueprint, basically, since you've been fasting all night long, when you were sleeping, it's my opinion, and the morning time is a very opportune time to be productive and energetic, and it's easier to be productive and energetic when you have a tasty breakfast that is balanced with all 3 macros. So that's what the breakfast blueprint is. It's a one-page download where you can mix and match different breakfast ideas based on macros, not on calories, not on points, not on carbs, but on a combination of macros, which is protein, fat, and carbs. So personally, I don't feel that fasting in the morning is the best thing to do. So meal frequency, let's talk about that a little bit. How many meals a day are you currently eating? Pop your number down below this video, especially if you're watching the replay. If you pop the number, just put hashtag replay so I can understand when you're watching this video and so I can comment to you throughout this video. I will still be commenting throughout the weekend. Yes, I'm going on a trip, but it's close by, so I can certainly check into my phone and see who's sharing it and interacting with me. But how many times a day do you currently eat? Share that with me. Now, I eat a day probably about 4 times. At my lowest weight, I'm not at my lowest weight right now, so completely transparent with you, completely honest with you about my situation. I'm not my lowest weight right now. However, I currently eat 4 times a day. And when I say 4 times a day, I don't mean I'm sitting down for a 4-course meal or whatever. I just mean that I have a substantial amount of food 4 times a day. And substantial is like a meal as opposed to a snack. Now, obviously, I'm a big fan of snacks because I'm doing a snack workshop. And for me, a snack is very similar to a meal. Like, you use the same philosophy with a meal. So basically, my snacks are like a smaller meal or a pumped up snack. I don't ever do just a handful of nuts as my snack because that's not balanced. A balanced snack includes all protein, fat, and carbs. Sometimes if you don't have time for a full-on meal as opposed to a snack, excuse me, then your snack would have 2 of the 3 macronutrients, which would be protein and fat, protein and carbs, fat and carbs. You get the plan. So a snack can be a little bit smaller and not have all the macronutrients, but that's the philosophy I take. So I eat 4 times a day currently. However, at my lowest weight, I was eating 5 times a day. I know some people, because I follow bodybuilders, I know some people that eat 6 times a day. Which, when you think about it, you are constantly eating throughout the day. So if you wake up at 8 a.m., no, let's say you wake up at 7 a.m. and you go to bed at 11 p.m. There's only so many opportunities for you to eat 6 times, right? You're probably eating wow, that, you know, it just doesn't fit within the day, you know, so that can be a significant time commitment. It's not something I was ever willing to try because it takes time. And when I say it takes time, I don't mean that, for one thing, most of the things you're eating probably have to be grab and go, portable, non-cook or whatever, because if you're eating every 3 hours, it has to be food you can take with you. And I know some bodybuilders who bring coolers with them with their food and their snacks and whatever, so that it's ready for them as they're doing what they're doing throughout their day, especially those bodybuilders who travel a lot, who are in the gym 3 hours a day, twice a day. You know, they need to carry their food with them. They need to have a small fridge or whatever, access to these things. So it's a time commitment, but it's also a logistical nightmare because you have to make sure you have access to that at the time that you need it. Not everyone's day is the same day in and day out. So I know from personal experience, I haven't done 6 times a day of eating, but I have done 5 times a day. And here's what that was really amazing for me. I was never hungry. That's the #1 benefit of eating more frequently throughout the day. You are never hungry. Because when you think about it, if you're eating every 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever, you don't have time to be hungry. Your stomach can sometimes take up to 2 hours to digest whatever it is you're eating. So if you just barely digested it, your stomach's like, I'm not hungry, man. I just digested this food. And then 2 hours later, you're eating again. So here's what happens when you eat without being hungry. You make smarter choices. You might choose the fruit and the vegetables over the salty snacks like the chips and the crackers. You might choose to take a little time to make something that's more involved than, say, something you open and tear and heat up in your microwave because you're not hungry. So you don't feel like you have to eat quickly. That's another thing. I'm a very quick eater. When you actually sit down to eat, and yes, I do recommend, no matter how many times a day you eat your food, you should always sit down to eat it. Don't eat it in the car. Don't eat it in front of the TV. Don't eat it while distracted, because that changes both how your body metabolizes the food and how you experience that food. And that could have an impact on how much you're eating. But you might take more time to sit down and eat your food, because if you're not hungry, you're not shoveling it in like there's no tomorrow. So you're having more of an experience around that food. That's another benefit of eating when you're not terribly hungry. Now, some people are like, oh no, intuitive eating, you should only eat when you're hungry. Why eat when you're not hungry? Listen to your body, blah, 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 blah. That's great. And it's very hard to do. Intuitive eating, especially if you're a person who eats fast, tends to overeat, and has struggled with dieting in the past. I feel that diets create a certain scarcity mindset, and it can be difficult for you to learn how to eat intuitively if you've had a whole lifetime of scarcity mindset, where like, there's not enough for me, I need to eat it before it goes away, oh my gosh, there's leftovers, I can't leave leftovers. You create a certain mindset in your head, and it can be very difficult to change that script for yourself. So intuitive eating, which is basically listening to your body, understanding when you're hungry and things like that, it's a beautiful, wonderful tool, and I am in full support of it. But most people I work with are not at that place. That's an advanced technique, and they may not be ready there. So the first step is to eat when you're not hungry. Yeah, this sounds really weird, okay? I get it. It sounds really weird. But I know that I physically did not recognize my hunger until I got to the point where I was eating so frequently that I made different choices. I didn't always finish what was on my plate. I put more effort and time into making the food that I was going to eat. I took my time savoring the food I was eating as much as I could, because if I was working in the office, I would have to eat at the desk. I only had 1 lunch hour, whatever. But I had break time, and I could eat within 15 minutes easy because I'm a fast eater. So I needed to train myself to recognize when I'm hungry and not. And that may not be your situation, and I totally understand. In fact, here's an opportunity for you. Do you understand, like, do you think on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely and 1 being not so much, do you think you understand when you are actually physically hungry? Tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, whether you can recognize that you're physically hungry, 10 being, oh, all the time, 1 being, not really. I'd love to hear from you, because I know my experience before I went to 5 meals a day, I was eating for a variety of reasons, and most of them had very little to do with hunger. Yes, I would eat when I was hungry as well, but I ate a lot more times when I was not hungry. So for me, my cues were messed up. And if you had told me at that point to do intuitive eating, I would have laughed in your face, because that thing didn't exist for me. And at that time, it wasn't really popular, whatever. It doesn't matter if something is popular. It matters if it can work for you. It would not have worked for me. So those are the pros of eating more frequently throughout the day. You eat before you're hungry. You take more time with preparing your food. You take more time with eating your food. You might have smaller portions, because if you're constantly eating and you're not hungry, you're going to stop eating because you're not hungry, right? Those are the pros of it. Another pro of it has to do with metabolism. Now, I'm not going to dive into the science behind this. I follow someone who has really good content around this. His name is Tom Venuto. He talks a lot about this. But basically, the idea behind it is the more frequently you eat, the more you're revving up your metabolism, because you're forcing your body to digest food more frequently throughout the day. And believe it or not, digesting food takes some effort inside of your body. It's something that happens naturally, unconsciously, whatever. So we don't necessarily understand that it's taking some effort, and it might be increasing our metabolism, sending our energy resources to our stomach in order to make that process happen. So it is, in short, increasing our metabolism by a small amount, not a huge amount, and that is also impacted by what you're eating. So if you eat more protein, there's more of a thermogenic effect, is what they call it. I'm not going to dive into the science behind that, but there is some research there, and if you have more information, if you want to learn more about that, Tom Venuto is the best resource for that, because I am not a scientist, but it has certainly proved to be true for my situation. So just throwing that out there. What are the cons of eating throughout the day? Because I know a lot of people who are intrigued or interested in intermittent fasting. They say it's convenient because they only have to eat like twice a day or something. It's certainly less frequent than 4 times a day, 3 times a day even. So it's more convenient because they make fewer food decisions. Is it really? You're not making fewer food decisions. You're just splaying them out across a different period of time, right? You still have to decide what you're eating. You still have to decide how much you're eating. You still have to decide all these things. But people somehow think that food is like an inconvenience. Oh my God, what are we eating? What can I eat? How much should I eat? Like, what do I have time for? I'm on the go. What are my kids going to eat? Like, food seems to be an inconvenience for some people, or the people who forget to eat, which I'm not one of those people, but the people who forget to eat, they're like, oh, intermittent fasting is great because then I can just not worry about food. Who worries about food? That's so funny. No, it's funny because I'm like, don't you enjoy eating? Anyway, so for people who are intrigued by intermittent fasting, it's probably because they have less time that they have to invest in food prep, food decisions, creating food, packing the food, carrying the food. And that's great. It's true. It's more convenient in that sense. However, what if you really are hungry during that period of time that you're fasting? And I know certain fasts are not complete fasts. Like sometimes there's a liquid fast. Sometimes there's certain things you can have, just not food. The idea behind it, from what I understand, is that it's allowing your body to detox because it's not constantly digesting food. And I get it. And I know there's science behind it. I haven't read the science. I'm sure there's great information behind it because it wouldn't be a movement if it wasn't. Yes, it can be more convenient because you don't have to do as much food prep. But what happens when you're hungry? Do you just deny that intuitive eating model? Do you just deny yourself because you're like, it's not the right time? Now, that's kind of like the flip side of people who ate on a schedule, right? They're like, I'm eating at 5 no matter what, or I'm eating at noon no matter what. That's not really how life is lived. Personally, I prefer to have a more flexible, adaptable lifestyle. On weekends, my family eats when we're hungry. And unfortunately, sometimes we're hungry at different times of day. But personally, I know that I do best. And when I say I do best, I eat the right things in the right quantities, and I'm happy and regulated when I'm on a schedule. So for me personally, that works out for me. However, I need to have some adaptability and flexibility with my family situation, because my kids might be doing multiple activities and we can't necessarily sit down to eat at a certain time. Yes, I can plan ahead, and I do plan ahead, but that doesn't mean that like I can always be on a schedule 100% of the time, at least not on my own schedule. So if you're a person who has people in your life that impacts your eating decisions, intermittent fasting might not work out so well. What if everyone wants to go out to eat? And you're like, I can't because I'm fasting right now. You sit there and watch them eat. To me, that's kind of a sad face situation, because you don't want to go out with people and sit and watch them eat while you're drinking your water or whatever. That's just kind of sad, right? Or you make the decision not to go out with your friends, and then you're missing out on that social interaction, because eating is, after all, social interaction. So just throwing it out there. And you can be social and interact without eating. I get it. But sometimes food is the place that brings us all together. It's like the central place. So that would be challenging from an intermittent fasting standpoint. What are the cons of eating more frequently throughout the day? Well, we've already addressed it because we talked about not eating frequently throughout the day, is the food prep. You do have to plan. When I was eating 5 times a day, I had to know ahead of time, before I sat down to eat, what was happening and what I was going to eat. Because if I left it to chance, it was less likely that I was going to be eating the types of food that I wanted to eat during that time, or that were balanced enough to kind of be more than just a snack and be more of a meal for me. So I packed my things together. I had my containers ready. I wasn't carrying coolers with me, but now I probably would have to, because I am in my car a lot. So I would probably have to keep a cooler in my car, have those things available to me. And sometimes, because some of the things I tend to eat, my family doesn't eat, I would have to have separate things for them. Yes, I carry snacks for my children. Why wouldn't I? They tend to have situations where they need a snack and they're hungry. And it's not always the kind of food that I would tend to eat. So those are considerations. It does take more time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you're eating 4 or 5 times a day, it takes more time. Because not only do you have to plan your meals, your typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but you have to be conscious. I'm not saying you have to plan every single thing you do, but you definitely have to be more conscious of having the right ingredients and materials on hand, no matter where you are and what you find yourself doing throughout the day, to make sure you have those meals for yourself. So that's one of the drawbacks. There are certainly ways to make it more time effective, to make a better use of your time. There's lots of ways to quickly prep things. I'm not saying you have to spend all day on Sunday to do that. You can certainly do it a couple times a week. I was doing that, like after the kids would go to bed, I would do a sheet pan meal, and then I had meals for the next couple days. So there are certainly things you can do. Or you can join me for my snacks workshop, and you can have tons of snacks on hand that are balanced and already have the needs you have. Another con of eating frequently throughout the day, when it's time for you to eat and nobody around you is hungry. So that can be an issue if you feel uncomfortable eating in front of people, or like you need to sit down and have a proper meal, like a big meal. You may find yourself just having a little something while you're going about your day, but nobody else is hungry. And then that could pose an interesting situation for you if 2 hours later they want to have a meal and you're like, well, I just ate, so I'm not hungry. So those situations can come up. Again, pre-planning things will make that easier. You can determine, like, if you are awake before them, awake after them. You can certainly flex your scheduling in such a way that it still fits your schedule while it fits their schedule. I have been able to make it work. In the past, I would get up at 6 or 5 and I would do my workout and I would eat my first breakfast, and then I would have my second breakfast when everyone else in the household was up and getting ready for their day. So it's certainly possible. You could have a situation where maybe you have dinner with the whole family at 5 o'clock, but you work out in the evening, So you find yourself eating your second dinner at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever. It's easier than you think to make that work. But if that's a challenge for you, I just want to tell you it's easy to do. Another challenge with eating frequently throughout the day. Sometimes restaurant eating can be a challenge. I've made ways to make it work, but you have to be a beast about portion control. So we know that portions in the restaurants are quite huge. And if they serve you a plate of whatever, that could be your entire day's worth of food that you would typically have. And because you're eating frequently, probably you're not terribly hungry when you go out to restaurants. So even though the temptations may be there to go all out, you won't be physically hungry enough. So that's the good thing. But the bad thing is anything you order, even on the appetizer menu, will probably be too large for you. So you have to be really intentional about portioning out and determining what you're going to eat and not giving into the ambiance of the restaurant and eating everything anyway. So if you're going out to eat for dinner, that won't be such a concern for you, because you already would have had a full day's worth of food and you won't be hungry, and you might be more willing to portion out your food. So, take a doggy bag right away, move the things from the plate that you're not eating, put them away from you so you don't reach them. Don't reach for the bread basket. Typical restaurant things that I shared in last week's live stream. Last week or the week before. So those are some considerations. Now I'd love to hear from you. When you think about how many times a day you currently eat, does that feel good for you? Does that feel like the right number of times for you? And when I say that, what I'm asking you to look at is, how often are you hungry throughout the day? And do you feel like that's optimal for you? Because if you're currently happy with how many times a day you eat, great. Then keep doing that. If you're not happy with where you're at and you're like, well, I know I can be better because A, I eat too much, because when I sit down to eat, I'm constantly eating. Or B, I'm hungry all the time and my snacks aren't cutting it for me. Those are some easy ways you can tell if it's the right number of meals for you. I can't tell you what the right number of meals per day is for you, but I do know that if you're either kind of shoveling everything in when you do get a chance to sit down to eat, you may not be eating frequently enough. If you are hungry throughout the course of the day and you're constantly snacking, but you still don't feel satisfied, then you may not be eating frequently enough. And if you feel like every single thing you're doing every day revolves around food, then you might be eating too frequently. Or if you feel like you just don't want to take the effort into, if you have a certain lifestyle that does not lead to eating frequently throughout the day, then perhaps you should tone down how often you're eating. And then you adjust your portion sizes according to how many times per day you eat. So in a nutshell, that's my philosophy and my content around meal frequency. I'd love to hear from you. How often a day do you typically eat right now? And do you feel that's the right number of times to eat for you? Share with me in this video. In the meanwhile, join me for my snacks workshop. I'll pop the link below here. Get your 50% off meal plan. That's through next week. And in the meanwhile, I hope you have a beautiful, lovely weekend, and we'll talk soon. Asha's coming to say hi.
Hi.
All right, have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon.